Órale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFP podcast. This is Jorge Martin, and we are in round 2, la segunda ronda of our beat writer / insider series. Yes, Familia, we are on YouTube. Please give us a like and subscribe. Also, we are sponsored under the umbrella of the Fantasy Points Media Group. When you go to Fantasy Points, make sure to get a subscription in there. We're going to get you 10% off when you put in the promo code Familia22, Familia22 if you want to do it in Spanish, which is something, it means a little bit to our guest today. Make sure you got some of the best fantasy football minds out there. You got John Hansen, Tom Brawley, Graham Barfield, Scott Barrett, Wes Huber, Joe Dolan. I mean, just some real G's from the fantasy football industry, giving you some of the best advice out there. You also got, we just recently launched college football and also a PGA. So you got golf, football, everything. What more do you want? 10% off. I'll get you 10% off when you put in the promo code Familia22. So, we've had it in relaunching this series, Familia. Has been great. I've been able to reach out to some of the people who were on the show last year, and people have been jumping back in. This was one of my everybody was my favorites, so I just love them. This is Jess Root. I tell you, it was un gran placer, mi amigo, to have you on last year, and un gran éxito to have you back. He's the managing editor for CardsWire, which is under the USA Today umbrella. He covers the Arizona Cardinals for them, and is just one of the great minds. I mean, I'm telling you, some of the insight that he laid down last year, I mean, it was like he was Nostradamus looking into the future. He had so much stuff, and I tell you, and Familia, one of the things to know about him, he's like Batman. Because by day he's a mild-mannered Spanish teacher, and then when his off hours, that's when he's covering the Cardinals. So he also has a podcast, Rise Up, See Red. So check that out, to wherever you get your podcast. And let me tell you something: if you want taco recommendations, go to this man, because there is just he's got a palette that's out there. And quite honestly, I'd rather listen to him talk Spanish than me, because he has one of the coolest accents. Bienvenido, mi amigo, Jess Root. Bienvenido. Gracias for joining us.
Un gran placer de poder estar contigo otra vez, con sus oidores. Pero sí, y acabo de llegar de Costa Rica hace unas semanas. Llevé unos estudiantes y volví. Ahora estoy descansando un tanto. Minicamp ya acabó. Now we're at the dead part of the off season officially.
And that's the best part about filling that dead part of the offseason with these kind of stories with some of the people from who are covering the NFL teams, and just to kind of look at I said Nostradamus, but just a little bit looking at the crystal ball. Who are some of the guys who could be primary players and getting the touches, or what the offensive scheme looks like? And one of the things about the Cardinals, and you've been covering for a while now, you've got some continuity here. This is several years now with Cliff Kingsbury. You got so he's calling the plays. You got Vance Joseph still on the defensive side. You got continuity with the quarterback and Kyler Murray. This is how different is this for you?
Honestly, the difference is this year is that they had the playoff experience and a collapse all at once. So they've played 2020. They looked like they were doing good things. They had some injuries and then fell apart late. Last year, man, they looked great. I expected them. So before the season, pretty much you could probably say everyone thought the Rams were going to be the favorite to win the NFC. I believe that as well. I believe the Cardinals could compete for a playoff. But when they started 7-0, started 10-2, all those expectations were elevated. By the end of the year, they were a wild card team that lost into the first round to the Rams, who eventually won the eventually won the Super Bowl. So if you look big picture, Cardinals met exactly what expectations were, kind of the best case scenario for them. They won double-digit game. They made the playoffs. They almost won the division, but ultimately were not good enough to beat the world champion Rams. The problem was how that happened, because they had the hot start 7-0, 10-2, but then they only win one more game the rest of the way, and then they're embarrassed in the playoffs. And so there is a really bitter taste in the mouth of Cardinals fans here because it's like they look like a Super Bowl team and it just unraveled. But big picture, they accomplished basically what last year's ideal situation would have been, minus winning a playoff game. Like, would have, if we were looking at last year, kind of what we wanted to see the Cardinals do was do what the Browns did in 2020, take that next step, make the playoffs, maybe, sneak a playoff win. The Cardinals just didn't get the playoff win because that second half of the year was rough. DeAndre Hopkins gets hurt. And they'll point that they talk about the Hopkins injury as being, but it wasn't just that. So you took their number one weapon on offense out. Last year they played a kind of a platoon of running backs with James Conner and Chase Edmonds, and they were rolling that first half of the season. The second half of the season, until the playoff game, they never had both players healthy. And even the playoff game, neither one was 100%. So for the entire second half of the season, when it's either Edmonds or Conner. Now Conner had a fantastic season and got the new contract, but the offense took a step down. The offensive line had injuries and they tailed off in their play, and so everything offensively was more difficult. But it wasn't just that. Defensively, they fell apart. J.J. Watt got hurt. And the first half of the season they were so good. J.J. Watt got hurt. Jordan Phillips was never healthy all year, and so they took a hit on the defensive line. Chandler Jones had 5.5 sacks after week one combined. And then what really hurt was the injuries in the secondary. Robert Alford, who was playing very, very effectively, got hurt. Marco Wilson, their rookie, who was solid as a rookie, missed a few games. And so with this little bit of decline in offense and a precipitous decline in defense, that made everything fall apart. The Cardinals had some warts defensively. They weren't great at stopping the run, but the issue that they didn't run into, they could stop the run. The problem was their best run defense was their offense. And when they got leads, teams couldn't run the ball anymore. And so that made their defensive scheme easy to do. And it was easy to make plays. But when the offense was no longer humming and they suffered injuries on defense, so you've got closer games, they can't stop the run. You got injuries in the secondary, so now they're giving up plays in the passing game. It was a bad combination. So coming into this offseason, a lot of people wanted to see an overhaul. Cardinals didn't see it that way. So they brought back, they lost Chandler Jones, they lost Christian Kirk, but they basically just re-signed everybody. And then they traded for Marquise Brown. They've got they signed Jeff Gladney, who tragically died just not too long ago in a car. And he was projected to be one of their starting cornerbacks. They're basically do what Alford did, come in and nickel packages and guard the boundary. Sadly and tragically, he has an accident that kills him in a car accident, and so they're left with holes at cornerback. Chandler Jones has not been replaced, but they drafted a couple of young kids. But this is a team they view that the front office sees this was a playoff team that won 11 games and because of injuries fell apart. So let's bring back these key players. We can compete if we stay healthy, and we expect Kyler to be better. And so they believe by bringing back basically the same core that they can achieve at least what they did last year, which with how things ended, it's a hard sell for a lot of fans. But if you look at the NFC, your expected division winners are pretty much there. So you've got LA in the West, you've got Dallas in the East, you've got the Bucs in the South, you've got the Packers in the North. After that, the playoff rate is wide open because there's a bunch of teams that are right in there. And the Cardinals were the best of those teams last year. So can we expect the Lions to be a playoff team, or the Bears to be a playoff team, or the Vikings? The Vikings have the best chance, I think, there. In the West, the 49ers, they made the NFC Championship game. I don't believe in their projections to be that great, because if you look at Kyle Shanahan's record as a head coach, Jimmy Garoppolo is 31, and so he's 31-14 with Jimmy Garoppolo starting. He's 8-28 with everyone else, and they are willingly moving on from Jimmy. They're 8-28 when anyone other than Jimmy Garoppolo starts under Shanahan, and they're just letting Jimmy go because they have this guy in Trey Lance that they traded 3 first-rounders to get. And I get why they're doing that, but Trey Lance, in my opinion, is not Patrick Mahomes in year 2. And so while they do have a deep roster, he's not going to give them the level of play that Jimmy did. And so I think they'll be a competitive team, but to expect them to be competitors is for the division of the NFC West, and Seattle's terrible.
Rebuild.
Oh my gosh, I don't even understand what they're doing. They trade Russell Wilson, they cut Bobby Wagner. They've got 3 new offensive. They're rolling with Geno Smith and Drew Lock at quarterback. And Drew Lock was the reason why Denver wanted to move on at quarterback.
Why they really needed it.
Yeah. So the Cardinals, I think, have as good a chance as any to make the playoffs. They're going to, I think, in a best case scenario like last year, they can compete with the Rams, because the Rams, while they added some big names, they did lose a lot of depth, and they have questions on the offensive line because they've lost a couple players, including left tackle Andrew Whitworth. So they do come with questions, but they've already proven it. So they're definitely the favorite. But I think if the Cardinals stay healthy, they can compete with the division, but should be right in the mix for the playoffs, which is what you kind of expect from them this year. It'll just look a little different with DeAndre Hopkins suspended for the first 6 games, which means they're going to incorporate Hollywood Brown. Instead of a platoon and running back, James Conner will be the workhorse, like Kenyon Drake was in 2020. But in that passing game, even without Hops, you've got DeAndre Hopkins. So 6 games we don't have him, but you've got AJ Green, you've got Hollywood Brown, you've got Rondale Moore, you've got Zach Ertz, you've got James Conner. All of them are good weapons in the passing game. The question is going to be, can they hold up defensively? Because this offense should still be solid. And when Hop gets back, they should be great.
No, yeah. And we're going to get into each one of those. Everything starts with number 1, numero uno. And I still remember the game against the Rams, the first game. I think it was the first weekend in October. He was blistering. He was scintillating. It was he was fantastic, just absolutely torched SoFi Stadium. And I mean, he was looking like an MVP candidate when they were 7-0. And obviously the injury came, and it was the second year in a row where injury kind of slowed him down in the second half. It's, we're now all, this is year 4 in this offense. So so there's no surprises anymore. What can we expect? And, from a throwing standpoint and also from a running standpoint when it comes to him, because his legs are probably, I think he's got the quickest legs of any quarterback, and that's including Lamar Jackson. What do you think? ¿Qué dices?
I still think so. If he doesn't get hurt, I thought he was going to be a 5,000-yard combined guy last year between passing and rushing. He did not run. Like, that's the thing about, so some of these quarterbacks look to run. Kyler doesn't want to run. He knows he can. He knows he's a great runner. But that's not what he wants to do. He doesn't want to run. He wants to be great in the passing game. He wants to push the ball down the field. There are some who are really worried about paying him top quarterback money. But if you look, like, he's been at least as good as what could be expected for a guy that was drafted first overall, rookie of the year. 2020, he was selected as a Pro Bowl starter. Last year, selected as a Pro Bowl and not an alternate. So that's 3 years in a row where he's recognized by peers that he's one of the best in the game. He looks for a 4 or 5 game stretch, a 3 or 4 game stretch in 2020. He looked like an MVP candidate. For half the season last year, he looked like an MVP candidate. There is nothing about Kyler Murray that tells me that he's going to go backwards. And so I expect to see him, provided that he and his team stays relatively healthy, that we can see him take another step forward and be an MVP type candidate throughout the season. That doesn't mean he's going to have bad games, but rather than looking how bad he did in that playoff game, because let's be honest, everybody played like crap in that game for the Cardinals. Every single player played like crap in that game. There wasn't a single positive that came out of that. And the second half of the season after Hop went down, they struggled offensively, and they weren't getting anything other than Kyler trying to do things. So it was Kyler, Zach Ertz, and James Conner, and that was basically it. I'm going to say this year, if he stays healthy, he's going to have that 5,000 yard combined year between rushing and passing. He's been on the cusp of 4,000 passing yards the last 2 seasons. And I think he takes that next step because the pass game should be humming this next year. And 30 to 40 total touchdowns, I think, is like, he's going to get his money, and he expects to be great. So I'm going to expect him to be great this year. On the fantasy side of things, what's going to be really hard is everything else, because Hop's out, and so in the passing game, those numbers are going to be very interesting. The one thing that you can probably ride with is James Conner. He's going to be the workload. So like last year, he was the 50-50 guy, and he got all the touchdowns because they used him inside the 3. He's going to get also
18 touchdowns. 18 touchdowns.
At worst, you're looking at a Kenyon Drake type season in 2020. I think that's low end. What Kenyon Drake gave him in 2020, I think that's the low end of what James Conner is going to give him.
Yeah, because he's still young, and I mean, he looked great. He was relatively healthy last year. I mean, just
got a nose for the end zone. He makes plays in the passing game. Like, it was funny because I knew that he was a threat out of the passing game from what he did in Pittsburgh, but locally it was kind of the belief that he was just kind of a one-trick pony, that he was just a big inside the tackles guy. I knew he could catch the ball, and he showed that late in the year. But everyone now knows that he's kind of the complete back. They will miss Chase Edmonds because there was a special dynamic that he added to the offense. But watch out for not for big fantasy numbers, but watch out for Eno Benjamin, third-year player out of Arizona State. He was inactive every game his rookie season. He got a taste last year and made a few plays. But Cliff Kingsbury does not offer out unsolicited praise usually. He also never criticizes his players publicly, ever. But he has, on 3 different occasions, praised Eno Benjamin unsolicited about how he's done this offseason. Even said on Tuesday after minicamp that he looks like a starting running back. Now, I'm a huge Eno Benjamin fan. He's went to Arizona State. I'm an Arizona State season ticket holder, and so that's great for me. But I've never expected Eno to do anything. I can't expect that, because especially they went and signed Darrell Williams, who is a perfect change of pace guy who can catch. He's bigger. He's kind of like James Conner, just not as athletic, but he can catch passes. He can pass block. But Eno Benjamin might be a playmaker. He probably doesn't give you a lot in terms of fantasy, but a playmaker to watch for the Cardinals.
I was gonna ask. So, you've got Connor. Could Connor just take some of the work that Chase Edmonds was doing,
he's going to be the lead guy. That's like what they did with Kenyon Drake in 2020, where Chase Edmonds was spelling him. Chase pushed himself into a co-starting role. Chase was the starter, and Connor was 1A, 1B. Connor is 1. Connor is 1 this year. He's the workhorse. They will spell him, but he will be the 20 touch guy at running back this year. So there'll be no question as to, if you're looking for a fantasy running back to own from the Cardinals, there's no question it's Connor. There's no splitting carries. As long as he's healthy, he's going to get the workload like Kenyon Drake did a couple years ago.
Incredible. Yeah. Okay. Love it. Now let's talk about the receivers. So much is important for fantasy teams to kind of get off the hot starts. And I think we're expecting Kyler Murray to get his numbers early on. So you got 6 games with no DeAndre Hopkins. How do you, and you just got his college teammate just got traded here, Hollywood Brown. I- is he gonna kind of take that number one role, and kind of how do you see the targets being broken up over over those first 6 games, because we know what's going to happen when DeAndre Hopkins is back. He's the lead dog.
It's going to be interesting to see. I'm guessing because of the relationship that Kyler has with Hollywood, that he's going to be. And from what I've seen, now I expected it to kind of count for Hopkins' absence for AJ Green to move over into the role of the X. From the limited amount of things that I saw, AJ was still at the Z, and it was Hollywood running the X in Hopkins' spot. But what they like about Hollywood is that he can play inside and out. I think we can get from AJ Green basically what we got last year. And we'll say this: they were on pace to have 3 receivers hit 1,000 yards about midseason. Hop goes down, the dynamic changed, and so no one got to 1,000 yards. AJ was close at 854. Kirk was close in the 900 range, but they could have done better. They should have done better late in the season. And now they add in Zach Ertz, who tied a franchise in 11 games with the team. He tied a franchise record for receptions by a tight end with 56. That's not saying much. That's not big numbers, but over a 17-game season, you're looking at 75 to 80 catches for Ertz. And so it's the first 6 games. I'd expect to see a lot from Hollywood. I'd expect to see a lot from Ertz. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be inconsistent, like the type of games you get from Green and from Rondell Moore. Once Hop gets back, I don't know how that share is going to look, but I'm going to guess that Hollywood is going to be great early, and maybe his production tails a little bit, but I would expect him to be 1,000-yard receiver this year because, well, one, they traded him to be great, and Kyler loves him. I think Hollywood is a perfect fit in this type of offense, so it's going to be fun to see how he plays in the offense. I think AJ Green, we know what he's going to offer. Rondell Moore is going to play the Christian Kirk role, and he offers. So last year he got lots of touches, 54 catches, but I think the average depth of target was behind the line of scrimmage.
Yes, like 0.5 or something like that.
Something crazy. He was within a yard of the line of scrimmage. He'll have a different role this year. At least the first 6-7 games, he will be running routes down the field like Kirk. And so we'll be able to put up a lot more yards than he did last season. Once Hop gets back, it's going to be interesting because then Rondell gets pushed into that 4th receiver role, and then you're going to have to split reps with Hollywood and AJ, because it's not like now they might bring Hop on a little bit slowly because his first game back will be a Thursday night, so he won't be in great football shape. He's gonna get amped up during training camp, but then he's gonna have 6 weeks where he cannot be with the team. So even if he's working out, it's not like he's gonna be football ready. There's no way to replicate that. And so,
oh, go ahead.
No. So, but if you're looking, so I would expect Hop. We'll get probably the best version of Hop that we can get over the last 11 games. And I think Hollywood will be the money guy early in the season. I think Ertz as well. Now, granted, there's other tight ends in the league that are going to be better. Like there's better tight ends to grab in terms of fantasy. You got Kittle, Waller, Goddard, Kelsey, all those guys. But Ertz won't be a bad guy to have because Kyler's got a really good rapport with him. Ertz can still play at a high level, but he's not going to have 100 catches. We're going to probably looking at 75, 80 catches, 800-ish yards, kind of near what his high-ish end, not the high end, but near what his above average days in Philly were.
Well, those kind of numbers, fantasy owners would just be over the moon to get that from Zach Ertz, especially considering he's the guy that if you don't want to spend up and
Right.
spend
So
up on
he is a value pick at tight end if
yeah.
you're gonna you're gonna pay a premium for Kittle and Kelsey and those guys. Ertz could be a nice value pick at tight end.
So, and how did the offense change with him? Because I remember last year you were not high on the tight ends at all. I mean, it was just, I mean, did he just add a different element?
He's
Because
that good.
yeah,
He's that good. And they used him they used him a lot. So Max Williams, his primary role, and he'll be back sometime, but they drafted Trey McBride out of Colorado State, and they think that he's more like Max Williams. But like the kid, I wouldn't. I'd be shocked if he had more than about 20 catches this year. So, but Ertz is different because he's a legitimate pass catching tight end, and so they use him. You run him in receiver routes, but he's not going to be against cornerbacks.
and I like that you're not. I'll tell you this: the fantasy community has been basically burying Rondale Moore, thinking he's so far down the depth chart. AJ Green came back. Zach Ertz is now a guy, but I'm intrigued by the fact that he's going to be running a lot of the routes that Christian Kirk was running. So that's very different. So there's still some hope for him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially during that first 6 games, he will be in that Christian Kirk role. So he will not be a gadget player at the beginning of this next year. He will be running down the field. So he'll get some screens, but he will also run down the field, which honestly, that's why they drafted the guy's a 4.3, 4.40 guy, and he's fast and he runs mean. Like he had some issues a little, but like the first part of last year is like every time he touched the ball, he embarrassed somebody. He embarrassed somebody every time he got the ball for about the first 5 or 6 games. Then his role changed and things weren't going as well, and so there wasn't as much space. But he's a fun kid to watch.
Oh, love it, love it. Great overview of the offense. This is gold. But we're not going to stop there. Talked about the offensive line. There were upgrades last year, but Pro Football Focus isn't very optimistic about them for this year.
It's
What
very
what what is the outlook?
interesting. It's interesting because they ranked 25th, though. I think at the end of last year they were ranked 14th, and they changed one position, and that's Max Garcia left, who was with Will Hernandez, who was but has a much higher potential, has a much higher ceiling than Max Garcia. Highly touted out of UTEP, his second rounder, and he's reconnected now because the Cardinals' offensive line coach Sean Kugler super well. The room loves him. He was Hernandez's college head coach, so Kugler was the one that got Hernandez to perform at the level that he did in college to be drafted in the second round. They really like what Hernandez potentially could do. Now, we do have an issue right now because Rodney Hudson did not report to minicamp. There is some question whether he'll be here, whether it's retirement or what.
Oh,
Yeah, so their anchor in the middle, that's up in the air. Justin Pugh he's trying to transition to center and see if he can do the job. Otherwise, they're left with Sean Harlow, or they've got a rookie in Lacita Smith, who they like, played guard and tackle in college. They do like him, but he was a 6th-round pick. Otherwise, you're looking at they brought in Billy Price for a workout about a month ago. That's a possibility. Former 1st-round pick, not worked out really well in the league so far. J.C. Tretter's available, former Browns guy, Browns center. And so there's some veterans available, but because they haven't been in the building, they would have a lot to learn in terms of the offense and the calls. So let's hope Hudson comes back, because then that brings a lot of continuity. 4 of their 5 starters are back at the same position, and then all you're doing is swapping in Will Hernandez for Josh Jones and Max Garcia. You feel good about that. And when that line was healthy, they were more than adequate. You don't need a great line with the weapons that the Cardinals have. You need an adequate line. DJ Humphries, more than adequate at left tackle. Kelvin Beachum, more than adequate at right tackle. Justin Pugh is adequate at left guard. He's a solid guy. Hudson, when he was healthy, more than adequate at center, and it was just about being good enough. Beecham and Humphries can be very good. Pugh can be above average at best. But if he's moving the center, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But with the weapons they have, they don't need a lot of time. And they schematically, it's just a matter of can they be good enough to give Kyler the time that he needs?
Fantastic. Well, let's take a quick look at the other side of the ball now. You mentioned you talked a little bit about how the injuries kind of took down the secondary to take a step back in the second half of the season, the latter part. Let's start against the pass. How did they shape up against the pass this year?
It's going to depend on how the pass rush goes. They've got Marcus Golden back, which is he's productive. He's had 3 double-digit sack seasons. J.J. Watt's healthy, so the interior should be nice. You get J.J. Watt, Zach Allen, who was really pretty good in the second half after Watt went down. They can give you nice disruption in the interior. The question mark is on that other side, because on that other side, opposite of Golden, where they had Chandler Jones before, now they've got Devon Kennard, and they've got Dennis Gardeck, who had 7 sacks in 2020 and 93 snaps. That looks fluky. And then they drafted a couple of kids in the third round, Cameron Thomas out of San Diego State and Myjai Sanders out of Cincinnati. I think Thomas has the highest upside of the two of them. He gives you, still reminds people of Trey Hendrickson, that type of guy, or what's the guy that played in Washington for a while?
Oh, I mean, Trey Hendrickson at least gives you a great comp, and this is a guy who changed.
Ryan Kerrigan.
Oh, yes.
He comps physically with guys like Hendrickson and Kerrigan, who, like, at their high end is great. But I think as a rookie, if you can get 5-6 sacks out of Thomas, if he can play that much, that's good. But it's going to be interesting how they manufacture a pass rush. They've got great safeties. With Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons, they have the hope that they will be dynamic in the middle of the field, fewer mistakes. That was the issue last year, is Isaiah made plays but gave up too many, and Zaven couldn't see the field. So increase the number of plays that Isaiah makes and cut down the number of plays that he gives up, and then you've got a really good linebacker spot. But the question is a cornerback right now. You've got Byron Murphy, you've got Marco Wilson. I think Marco in year 2 could be really good. Byron has been up and down, but that third cornerback right now is up in the air, because it was supposed to be Jeff Gladney, so that Jeff Gladney would come in as the third cornerback and Byron Murphy would slide in the slot where the Cardinals really like him. But now they've got Antonio Hamilton, special teamer, journeyman, who did okay last year for the Cardinals when he got played. Now, hasn't been announced, but on the NFL Wire today, on Thursday, the transaction wire, the Cardinals signed former Packers cornerback Josh Jackson, so I guess he will probably be in the mix. I'd expect Rob Alford to be re-signed for training camp, so he could be in the mix again. But that cornerback group, they're going to have to be okay. And if the offense is going, so this is again, if the offense is going like it should, the defense doesn't have to be great. They just have to be adequate. But at the beginning of last year, they were fantastic. So they're creating turnovers. And they have the potential to do that, because you do have some upside. If you got Watt from the inside and Zach Allen from the inside and Marcus Golden, even if you don't have someone elite on that edge over left tackle, if you're getting pushed from other parts, they'll be in position to make plays. Do I expect them to play at the level they had early last year, where they were a top 5, top 10 defense for the first half of the season? No, I don't expect that, because it's hard to replace a guy like Chandler Jones. But should they be in a middle of the road defense? I think absolutely.
How about against the run? I mean, you mentioned earlier that they were susceptible against the run. Are they kind of shaping up as a team that's...
Watt's health will matter. Watt's health will matter a lot. Now, if Devon Kennard, the one thing is, as an edge guy, he's very good against the run. So, and they're not built as run stoppers, and they don't try to be built like run stoppers, because analytically, when you look at defenses, you need to stop the run, but it's more important to stop the pass. So it's more about not giving up big plays in the running game. So you just want to limit it to 1 or 2 or 3 yards rather than 15, because the money is in pass defense, because passing game is how teams score points. And so if you can be adequate against the run, and that will be determined by the health of their front line, and the offense plays well, they don't have to defend the run much. So if they're adequate early, the offense does what it's supposed to do, they won't have to play great run defense because teams will be playing from behind.
No, fantastico, mi amigo. That was a great breakdown. It's just incredible. Now, I just want to close out with one fun one. I mean, you like familia, go back and watch. Even if you're going to watch the last 5 minutes, you get just kind of like a taco dissertation from this man. So and so it was fantastic. So go back and watch that. But also, you just got back from Costa Rica. What were the food? Talk to me. Dígame.
So arroz y frijoles, if you don't mind that, you're gonna have that a ton, because like every morning, gallo pinto. I love it. I love it. So you have some gallo pinto with huevos. But so the fruta, it's so great. Their pineapple, the piña, the mango, and then on top of that, the plátanos fritos. Oof. I don't get that here in Arizona. That's not really a thing we do here, and so that was fantastic. I loved every single bit of that. And so I've been to Spain a couple times, Costa Rica a couple times. The Spanish food I get tired of. Except for the patatas bravas. Everything else, you start that European side because it's oily. It's different than what I eat at home. But Costa Rica, I like it. It's not a ton of variety because you get, whether it's a casado or gallo pinto, it's basically rice and beans and a meat of some sort. But hey, it feels good, tastes good, and just keep going. And then the frutas, that's the stuff that's the good stuff.
You got me hungry for some fruta, mi amigo. Como siempre, you hit it out of the park, like Paul Goldschmidt back in the day. So just that was.
No, he's still doing that. He's just in St. Louis now. He's still hitting it out of the park.
Yeah, mi amigo. Please point people to your great work. Please give him a follow. He's fantastic. Senor Jess Root.
Go to CardsWire. CardsWire.com is where my written stuff is. That's for if you want to find out about the Cardinals. My podcast, Rise Up See Red, we just put up our off-season roundup with minicamp and OTAs wrapping up. We just published that on Wednesday. But we'll be doing some opponent previews here in the next few weeks, where I get together with some of the other USA Today NFL wire writers. We talk about their off seasons, but that'll be coming up before training camp.
Oh man, como siempre, un gran placer. Everybody, familia. Eso es todo for our show. Please make sure. Okay, one more time. When you go to Fantasy Points, make sure you put in that promo code Familia22. Get that 10% off any subscription. You got so many subscriptions who are available to you. So Familia22, Familia22. Use that promo code Familia. Also, please make sure to give a like and subscribe when you're on YouTube. Por favor, that would be a big help. Also, special thanks to Anchor for putting our podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Find written content. I'm going to be having some previews coming out after following these insider series. Check those out. There's going to be I'm going to throw some stats in there and everything like that, and actually some actionable predictions based on the content that we got from these insiders. So you can find me at Jorge Martin 17 on Twitter. Go to Familia FFP, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get that. We're right there for you. So from Los Angeles to the desert heat, mi amigo, muchas gracias.
De nada, un placer.
Un placer, un gran éxito. And remember, everybody, todos somos familia. Salud.